up, guys? Once again, reporting from the Wynn on-court property here in Las Vegas. Perhaps my favorite poker room to play at in this city, and that's why I'm here today. We're gonna jump once again into Boston Jimmy's game. It's 25, 50, 100 usually. Sometimes it plays even bigger than that. So definitely some high stakes to be had. I'll also be playing, I believe, at Bellagio and maybe some other games across this weekend. So if you like Vegas videos, you're in luck. Let's start here at the Wynn and see what happens.
All right, guys, here we go again. We're at the Wynn in Las Vegas playing some 25, 50, 100. You'll have to excuse my voice. I'm feeling a little under the weather, but who cares? In the first interesting hand, there's a raise to 300 from early position. Middle position calls, the button makes the call, and I look down at Queen 8 suited in the small blind. I think it's a good hand to go for the squeeze with. Obviously, this is way out of line, but as per usual in private games, I'm here to give action, and I'm probably going to take any decent opportunity. So I make it $2,000. Early position raiser makes the fold, so that's a good start. But then the player in middle position, who originally just called the 300, decides the hell with it. I'm all in for $6,200. That's annoying. Button folds. Of course, I am not going to be folding. We have to call 4,200 into a pot that's already quite big. So I toss in the money. I don't think we're even going to be in that bad of shape either. If he's got some small pocket pair or even a hand like ace high, we're probably going to have two live cards. Off to C2 boards as my opponent wants. The first flop comes out with an 8, and then we actually end up having a full house. So that looks pretty good. And then on the second board, we flop top pair. So everything looks pretty decent until he turns over pocket aces. I didn't see that one coming. He laid the trap quite nicely, and we get sniped right off the bat. So we add some chips and move to the second hand where there's a late position raise to 300. I make it 1,000 on the button with 8-deuce offsuit. You're probably wondering, why are you doing this, man? To which I would say, man, I'm wondering the same thing. But I make it 1,000 on the button, 8-deuce offsuit, gets back around to the late position raiser, and he makes the call. The flop is pretty comical. Ace 8-deuce with 2 diamonds. Undeserving 2 pair right here on this flop. My opponent checks, and he's got around 4,000 and change left in his stack. And instead of playing this hand in some sort of normal fashion, like betting small, I decide to overbet jam all in. Mainly thinking to myself that this is going to look really bluffy, and if he's got an ace or some type of flush draw, he's not going anywhere. My opponent tanks for quite a while, but eventually does call, which looks like good news, and it turns out we are ahead. He has to run it twice. Again, I'm totally fine with either or. So we run 2 turns and 2 rivers. We end up making a full house on the first one. Second one doesn't change too much, and 2 pair is good on both boards. So Queen 8 suited, no good. 8-deuce offsuit, very good. That brings us to the third hand where I double straddle for $200. The button opens to 500, blinds get out of the way, and I look down at the beautiful pocket aces. And the nice thing about aces is when you've been punting and playing way too loose, you do expect to get some action given that table image. And that's certainly the case for me right here. So I make it $3,000. And not only do we get some action from the button, he makes it 8,600. That's right. Takes it upstairs with another raise. Back on me now, and this is obviously what dreams are made of. You're holding the nuts, and your opponent is making it 8,600 US dollars. I take a look at his stack, and it looks like he started with around 35K. I think an all-in here is completely reasonable. Sure, sometimes we might fold out, you know, ace 5 suited or whatever he might be bluffing with, but I don't get the feeling he's bluffing when he makes it $8,600. So I don't want to just call and risk him getting away from ace king or something. I jam all in, and he does make the call. So by far the biggest pot of the night so far at just over $70,000, and we've got aces. My opponent asked to run it twice. Again, I happily oblige. And the first board is very nice. We flop a full house. The second board, however, brings 2 kings on the flop. No further improvement for us, and we end up chopping versus ace-king suited. So kind of a disaster here. The dream spot where you have aces versus ace-king, and we only profit a few $100, if that. Rather unfortunate, but I guess it's better than getting scooped. Life goes on, and it goes on to this fourth hand where there's 1 limp. I make it 400 on the button. I've got king jack. Dylan Flashner is in this game. He calls in the big blind. Straddler calls too. So 4 of us going to a board of 995 with 2 hearts. Dylan checks. The Straddler now leads out on this flop for 700. I don't really know about that. Probably could just fold king jack off, but I do have the king of hearts and 2 overs. I decide to gamble and toss in the money, see what develops on future streets. We are still beating some draws as well. Dylan makes the call too, and we all go to a turn, which is the king of clubs, giving me top pair and what I think is probably the nuts at this point. Dylan checks again. This time the Straddler checks, so I do my own bidding. Could get value from a 5, flush draws, straight draws, even some weaker kings once in a blue moon, although I think that's pretty unlikely. I throw in $1,800. Dylan makes the call, and then the Straddler, who led out on the flop, he's out of there. So this hand's kind of weird, but that's okay. We have top pair. River is the 6 of spades. Shouldn't change too much, you know, unless he's got like 7-8 suited, which I don't see him calling the turn with. So overall, a nice card. Dylan checks again, and now I go for some more value with top pair, hoping to get looked up by a 5 or perhaps a non-believing, you know, type of pair like that. Maybe he's got a 6 now that was previously a flush draw. Who knows? So I throw in 3,300, and now we get the bad news as Dylan check raises for an additional 5,000. He makes it 8,300. Not a very fun spot because on one hand, we're getting a good price, and I don't want to get bluffed for such a small amount. But on the other, it feels unlikely that he is bluffing. I mean, is he really turning a 5 into a bluff, or maybe a missed flush draw into a bluff? Maybe. He certainly is capable. But I don't know. I go back and forth and actually think this one over for a few minutes. In the end, though, I end up deciding to make a tight fold, or at least tight to me. And luckily, Dylan is kind enough to toss me his cards once I do this, and he had pocket 5s, flopping the old full house. So we end up losing some money, but could have been worse. In the next hand, early position makes it 500, and I look down at ace king, another very real hand. So I make it $2,000. Back around to him, and he makes the call. So we go heads up in position to a board of 10-9-7 with 2 spades. Not the best board for ace king, or really for all my hands in this situation. So when he checks, I check it back. Turn card is the 7 of hearts, which is not the worst card in the deck. Now my opponent leads out for $3,200. And of course, just folding ace king right now is probably acceptable, but I feel like he could easily be bluffing with a hand like king jack suited, queen jack, you know, ace 8 suited, who knows, all sorts of holdings that he might just be stabbing the turn after I check back the flop. So I decide to call and see what develops on the river, thinking I might still have the best hand often enough. River's the ace of clubs. My opponent thinks it over for a bit and then checks. Back to me now, and even though we end up making what I think is going to be the winning hand more often than not, I'm not sure if we can get some value from worse. This is a solid player that we're up against in this hand, and I think he's either giving up on a bluff or setting up a check raise with, let's say, a hand like pocket 9s. So at the risk of perhaps losing some value versus, let's say, ace high flush draw that ends up rivering top pair, I decide to just check back, and it turns out that there was no value to be had anyway because he says, I have king high, you win. So I flip it over, and ace king is good. Happy I stuck around on the turn after his pretty big bet. In the next hand, there's a middle position raise to 300. I call in late position with 9-7 of hearts. Not sure I love this, especially without even being on the button, but whatever, that's what I did. The button makes the call, and then the Straddler calls as well. So 4 of us going to a board of 9-8-deuce with 1 heart. We have top pair and some backdoor draws. The Straddler checks, and then the initial raiser also checks. So when it gets to me, top pair, I think we could use some protection and get some value. So I toss in 1 yellow chip worth $1,000. button makes a call on my left, the straddler also calls, and the initial raiser folds. So 3 of us now going to a turn, which is an interesting one. It's the ace of hearts. So of course it brings in an overcard to my pair of 9s, but it also gives me the flush draw, and I think it's a pretty innocuous overcard at that. If it was a 10 or a jack, I'd be a lot more worried, but the ace feels like a card no one should really connect with too often after calling a bet on this flop. So when it checks to me, I continue betting small, around a third, $1,500. And now the hand gets kind of weird as the button elects to raise on my left. He bumps it up to $5,500. The straddler folds and it gets back around to me. And what do we want to do here? He's got around $15,000 remaining after this raise. Do we want to jam all in? I don't really think so. I think that would put us in a situation where we just get called by hands that are beating us and probably fold out all the other stuff. So I kind of rule that out immediately. Folding also seems a bit ridiculous with a pair and a flush draw. So I think calling, despite it being an uncomfortable situation, is the best option. That's what I decide to do. I make the call and we go to a river, which is the 4 of diamonds. Changes nothing at all. I check it again, but the button does not slow down. Now he fires $9,500 into this pot. And this is now a miserable decision for me. Very, very rough spot with 9-7 of hearts given the action. Obviously, we could be cooked by ace 9, ace 8, even ace deuce suited. He might even have a hand like, you know, pocket 2s or pocket 8s that slow plays the flop. But that said, he could definitely also have some bluffs. Based on how I played the hand, he might be attacking some perceived weakness after my turn bet. Say he's got a hand like jack 10 suited, say he's got queen 10, say he's got 7-6, all these sorts of straight draws that maybe take the aggressive route on the turn. None of those improve on this river, right? They all still miss, which means a pair of 9s should still be ahead if that's what he's got. So I go back and forth for a while. It's actually been a minute since I tanked this long. I think this decision took me somewhere around 3 minutes, which is a ridiculous amount of time, I think. But in the end, I do decide that we beat enough bluffs. It doesn't help that I have hearts and that I have a 7. It's perhaps one of the worst candidates to make the call with, but I just had a really hard time believing that he would have many value hands that play this way. So eventually I do make the call and he says, "You win." So I turn it over and sure enough, we are good versus queen 10 of hearts. An interesting play from my opponent. I think it makes sense after he turns a flush draw to go along with his straight draw. But the 4 of diamonds doesn't help any of the draws, and in the end, it does help me win this $34,000 pot. So nice one here, and it seems perhaps the 3 minutes of thinking time was a worthwhile investment. Moving on to the next hand, there's a middle position raised to 500. The button makes the call, and I look down at ace 10 of spades in the small blind. Gonna come in for another re-raise. I toss in 3 yellow chips, making it 3,000 to go. The initial raiser calls, but the button folds. So we go heads up to a flop of 10-8-5 with 2 diamonds, 1 heart. Even though we flop top pair, top kicker, I think this is an okay board to check out of position sometimes. So that's what I do here, and my opponent checks it back. I'm feeling pretty good about it. Turn card's not great though, it's the king of clubs. I check again, could sometimes bet on this card, but I decide to check. And now he puts in 2,300. Obviously can't fold just yet after having underrepresented my hand, and a raise doesn't make any sense, so I make the call, and we go to a river, which is the deuce of spades. I check it again, and now he puts in $6,300. Not a fun spot, but we have a pretty good bluff catcher, and if he somehow turned a king, I think we just have to pay him off. So I think it over for a bit and eventually make the call, expecting to win pretty often actually against queen jack or whatever he might be bluffing with. But this is not one of those instances. He's actually got ace king suited at that. I was pretty surprised to see this because after I make it 3K pre-flop, I would expect him to re-raise with ace king. I guess not, and he ends up winning a decent chunk off of us. Nice hand. In the next one, I was unfortunately making notes on that previous hand, so there's no footage, but bear with me, it's a quick one. The straddle was on, I raise it up to 500 with ace queen suited. The button re-raises though, he makes it 2,000. I can't go anywhere just yet with a hand this nice, so I make the call, and we flop top pair. Again, it's queen 8 deuce with 1 heart. This is an even stronger top pair than the 10 previously. I check, and now my opponent blasts $4,000 into this pot, nearly a pot-sized bet, already making me feel a little uncomfortable, but of course I can't go anywhere just yet as we're beating many hands still, so I make the call. Turn card is the deuce of diamonds, doesn't change a thing. I check, and now he jams all in pretty quickly for 9,000. I don't know, another precarious situation developing. My hand is super strong. I think folding this is kind of ridiculous in theory, but considering my opponent in this hand and just the vibe I was getting in real time, I just think we're going to be up against kings or aces pretty often. So after some thought, I make another tight fold, and luckily my opponent is cool enough to show that he had pocket kings. So we do lose a little bit here, but again, could have been worse, and yeah, we avoid total disaster. And that brings us to the last interesting hand where there's an early position raised to 300. I make it 1,000 on his left with ace 9 of clubs, and my opponent makes the call. This is the same guy that we had 8-deuce off against earlier in the video, so I don't expect to get too much credit. Flop comes down queen 9-5 with 1 club. Not too shabby. We have middle pair top kicker plus some backdoor flush draws. He checks, I bet 700. My opponent makes the call, so we're both still in there going to a turn, which is the 10 of clubs. Interesting card as we pick up the nut flush draw. My opponent checks, and even though my hand is pretty sick now, I don't think betting makes a whole lot of sense. Sometimes we're going to face a check raise or even a check raise all in since he doesn't have a whole lot left. And it feels like we might just get called by a better hand like a queen or a 10, and then what do we do when the river breaks, you know? So I decide to just check it back and instantly regret that decision as it comes the jack of clubs on the river giving me the nuts. Well, I guess a straight flush is out there, but look at my cards. It would be impossible to have a straight flush. So I do have the nuts. He bets $500 now after I check back the turn, kind of a blocker bet on the end, and of course I will be raising it up. The question is how much. I settle on a size of 4,000, which is a pot size raise. My opponent does not snap call. He does not snap fold either. Instead, he goes into the tank for a while before eventually flicking in a call. That, of course, is good news as we have an unbeatable hand. And that's how we end this session, collecting an $11,000 pot. As always, I hope you all enjoy the hands and stay tuned for some final thoughts.
All right, that brings a wrap to yet another session here at the Encore Win property. And once again, I had a great time. I mean, Jimmy really knows how to put together a game. It's always a good vibe. It's a nice social setting. Everyone's pretty chill. So I definitely enjoyed myself. I don't want to say I played my best because that's definitely not the case usually when I'm here. But luckily, things worked out for the most part, and I was able to scrape together a win of somewhere around $15,000 according to my rough math. That is more than okay with me. Usually my expectation when I come to Vegas is that it's not going to go super well. Anytime I come out not losing is a good night. So I hope you guys were entertained. I hope you enjoyed the hands. And like I said at the start of the video, there is more Vegas poker to come. I believe I'm supposed to be at Bellagio 10 a.m. tomorrow for this private game in Bobby's room. I'm going to try to make a vlog from that as well. So stay tuned for that. Give this video a thumbs up or leave a comment or something. And that's all I have. As always, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.